Redlands. I know he left Pennsylvania, but he loved Redlands. And he really loved you all for your friendship and your concern for him. So we're really gathered here with you for him. And I just want to add to the things that my brother and sister have said, because for me, he was probably the most important person in my life. I say that looking at my husband because he probably says, well, no, he actually said, I don't really look forward to the day that your dad dies because it's going to be a hard one to say goodbye. But in some ways, he was the most important person in my life. And that isn't taking anything away from my mom. My mom was one of the most beautiful, graceful, smartest women who ever walked this earth. But in some ways, I think my dad and I were wired with the same weirdo wiring in our heads. And he instilled in me so many things. As a little girl, I grew up between two brothers who were always boxing each other in the head, and my dad plunked me right in the middle of them constantly. And the good part about that, in addition to being with my brothers, the good part of that was there wasn't a moment that Dad didn't expect that I could do anything in this world that I wanted to do, as long as I gave it my all and gave it my passion and my intelligence and my enthusiasm and responsibility. He gave me that. He gave me the confidence to think on my feet, even when I was stuck between two brothers. There have been many times in my life, like I'm sure you've had in yours, when you have felt like you were troubled and you'd made really stupid choices. And every single one of those times was a time I could go to my father and tell him the truth and know that he would give me unconditional love and support. He was wonderful. He never judged me. He let me make my stupid mistakes. And then he gave me a hug. And he'd also crack those stupid puns along the way. I have to say my dad was there for me every single time I ever needed anything. I actually don't know how I'm going to do it without him. He inspired me to be everything I could. And he completely forgave me when I was just a human. I loved him every minute. And I miss him. And you can't imagine how lucky the four of us are to have him as our father. Can you imagine being born to this guy? We are lucky, like you, to carry a piece of his spirit in our hearts and in our minds forever. He makes me smile. And as he said to me the last words I saw him say, "You're wonderful." And he is wonderful. So I want to just, in the spirit of smiling, I want to invite Greg Tornquist here. Greg is a friend of our family. He and his sister Betty were beloved of my dad, and Greg is going to sing the song "Smile" for my dad.
Standing room only for a great man. The very same things that bring tears here to the family and to some of us are also the things that make us smile about Dr. Fallows. So I'm going to just ease into this, and if I start singing and you want to sing along, the words are in your bulletin. Some of you may know this song. If you don't, you soon will. light up your face with gladness and hide every trace of sadness. Although a tear may be ever so near, well, that's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's for use in crying? And you'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile. Just smile.
Today I find myself in a different mood, even though the loss to the family and the community and the world is just as great as when our mom died. Crying but laughing too, as you've heard in many of these comments. I find myself ready, as the program says, to celebrate the life of James Albert Fallows and his achievements and the joy and influence he brought to the world. And partly that's because that was his nature, as you've heard from all of my siblings and from Uncle Bob, and partly what George Ryday, Dad's blessed friend, would say if he were here today. There were special relationships Dad had in his life. He loved everybody in this room, but he had special closeness, of course, for my mom, and of course for Helen, and for Yolanda Molina, a very dear friend of his, and for George Ryday, the friend of these last decades, with whom he learned to paint and learned to sculpt and learned to horse ride and had adventures that were glorious and dangerous and everything else. So you've heard about, it would be in Dad's nature to celebrate all these things. I am in the celebratory mood because of the bitter but sweet nature of Greg's song, and partly, as you all know, friends in Redlands, that much of the energy and vim and boundless enthusiasm and curiosity that embodied Tiger Jim Fallows were harder and harder for him to realize in recent years. And we now can celebrate and think about the way he really was, the person who made such an impact on all of our lives. I feel this way also in the celebratory mood because that is so much the way he would have wanted it. You've heard a glasses all the way full kind of guy. My mom would have wanted a fair amount of crying at her funeral. My dad would have said, there's nothing to do about it, so let's look on the bright side. What's for dessert? I hope it's a Dove bar. Over the years, I have thought a lot about the shape of Dad's life. Not simply what he meant to his friends and community, and of course his family and his patients. And those last so eloquently presented by one of his former patients, Aaron Cox Holmes, in a magnificent tribute published yesterday in the Redlands Daily Facts. I hope all of you will read that. But as his first child, the way I think of it, as opposed to oldest child, as the one who shared his name, as the one who went on medical rounds with him when I was in elementary school, and the one